Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted this lovely summer scene. It's really loose, so lots of expressive brushwork, just sort of suggesting clouds scudding across a blue sky, trees and mountains in the distance. And of course, those of you that do a bit of loose watercolour painting know that it's not as easy as it sounds, but the only way to really loosen up is to practice and make the mistakes, do the work, but have fun along the way, and that's how you can loosen up. Just a quick plug before I start. This is my new book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. It's now available to purchase from all good online bookstores, so follow the links below if you're interested. So for today's demo, I'm using Saunders Waterford cold press watercolour paper. It's a 1/4 imperial sheet. It's taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees. And I'm going to be trying to keep things as loose as possible, starting off with a very simple sketch in pencil, just putting in the rough position of the trees and the mountains in the distance, not getting bogged down with a fussy drawing, because a fussy drawing to start with can lead to a sort of overly fussy and overly detailed painting. So here's my line work. You can see it's just a really loose, simple sketch. And so I'm going to start off with the sky, and I'm going to paint it wet in wet, as I usually do. Using a large wash brush, mine is a 1.5 inch Princeton Aqua Elite Mottler brush, but any wash brush that you like will do. I'm wetting the sky with clean water, but leaving some dry patches so that I can avoid those, and the unpainted paper will help to give me my clouds. This is a mixture of cobalt blue and cerulean blue, but heavily weighted towards cobalt rather than cerulean. And you can see I'm sweeping the brush across the wet page, allowing the brush to sort of jump over the dry patches of paper as well, trying to create the sort of negatively painting the sky, so to speak, up to the cloud edges. I hope that makes sense, but hopefully you can see that by painting in the sky, wet in wet, I've got soft and hard edges, and that's given me my clouds without me having to really do very much at all. While everything's still wet, I want to get the foliage in for the trees. This is sap green, and it's been modified or desaturated with a little bit of burnt sienna. You can see I'm using the corner of the brush and the tips of the brush and very loose expressive brushwork just to put on the foliage on this large tree on the left and these smaller, more delicate trees. This is Peroline green, and it's a great green to come in and put in these lovely shadows, which will softly diffuse into the wet paint. Same on the other side. And this is what I mean by using expressive brushwork. I'm not actually painting the trees, I'm just dotting the paint onto the damp page and onto the dry parts of the page as well. But I'm following my sketch, just building up all these different greens, trying to keep a nice variety of greens so that I'm suggesting my trees rather than overtly painting them. I've added some cad yellow to brighten up my foreground green and a bit of raw sienna, dry brushing, sweeping horizontally across the foreground, again just to get the base in to suggest my foreground grasses without having to paint them. I'll do a bit more work to that later, but now carrying on building up my tree line. Notice how with my Mottler brush I'm using the tips, the corners and the full belly of the brush, changing it around so that I get a nice variety of marks, and then scraping in some grass textures, just suggesting the grasses growing up in front of those deeply shadowed middle ground trees, and then scraping a few trunks and branches through that rich paint just to very loosely suggest the trunks and branches of the trees in a few places, not too much. I might have overdone that, but it'll be okay, I'm sure, once the painting is brought together. And now my size 2 rigger brush and a mix of indigo, burnt sienna and a bit of cobalt blue to create a nice sort of brownish, blackish tree trunk colour. Following my pencil marks where I put in the indication of the position of these trees and then linking up the foliage with smaller branches. Keeping it nice and loose. And as these details come in, you can start to see the scene take shape a bit more. Instead of being just blodgy old brush marks, those marks are now suggesting these loose trees, and I can paint into the damp paint on the larger tree on the left as well, and maybe dab off a little bit of paint from the trunks if I want to lighten them. The same over on this side, not too much, just enough to sort of cement this illusion of these loose trees. So that's the first layer done. I now need to leave it to dry, then I can come back and paint in the mountains. So here's the dry painting so far. The next thing I want to do is to paint in the mountains. So I'm going to use my size 14 round brush and a mix of cobalt blue with a touch of alizarin crimson and a little touch of burnt sienna just to warm it up a bit, to give me this sort of greyish mauvish mountain colour, which I'm going to put across following my pencil line. Try and keep it sort of fairly pale. If I keep it nice and pale, then that mountain should recede back into the distance as it dries. And I can paint some sort of greyish green in front of it, just to sort of describe the distant land between the mountain and the middle ground trees here and the foreground. Being careful to go behind these trees. Just sort of softening back that hard outline a little. And that should dry back even lighter. And there goes the greyish green for the land. It's just these suggestions of slightly different planes of land, keeping things nice and pale and sort of bluish in tone, helps to create aerial perspective and to push the distance back. And now I've mixed up a nice rich mixture of my perylene green and painting using the wet on dry method. I'm adding in a few darks, negatively painting around some sort of grass shapes. So I'm increasing the shadow that I dropped in earlier and painting down into the foreground with some sort of rough marks to try to give the indication or the suggestion of grasses growing up in front of those trees. I'm using my small calligraphy brush for this. You could use any small brush. And then sweeping a bit of sap green and cad yellow across the foreground just to bring things together a bit more, to fill in a few of those white gaps that were left when I created the background. They will still show through this transparent layer as slightly paler marks. Now just working across here and there, making a few adjustments, adding a few more darks if I think I need them. And I'll just use my palette knife to take out a little bit of paint from the foreground and to flatten the foreground a bit with this sweep with my palette knife, softening it up by adding a few grasses. Something and nothing. And I think I'm just about to start overworking it. The foreground is nearly overworked. I think the rest is great. So I'm going to stop now, remove the tape and take a look at it with a clean white border and see how it looks. We can see it with fresh eyes once we get that nice white edge. And I'm really pleased with the sky. I'm very happy with the trees. The mountains are okay. I can see room for improvement there, and I can certainly see room for improvement with the foreground. But that's brilliant because that really gives me some clues as to how to progress when I move forward and paint something like this again. But I'm very, very happy with the sky in particular in this painting and the lovely loose trees. And don't be afraid to self-critique your own paintings, but do so as constructive criticism, and don't be sort of self-judgmental, because that won't help. If you can look at things analytically, it'll really help you to move forward and make those improvements as you practice your landscape painting. So I hope that was helpful and that it will encourage you to try similar loose paintings yourself. If you enjoyed the video, then please click on the thumbs up button. And thank you so much if you're subscribed. And if you're new here and you haven't yet subscribed, then I invite you to do so, because it really does help with our reach with the YouTube algorithm. And thank you so much to everybody that supports us and this channel on Patreon. We appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.